Lois P. Jones, author of Night Ladder, and I'm the second reader, Diane Frank, author of While Listening to the Enigma Variations. Lois is our first reader, so I'm going to do both a formal and then an informal introduction. Lois P. Jones is the poetry editor for Kyoto Journal and hosts Pacifica Radio's Poets Cafe on KPFK podcast. Her first collection of poems, Night Ladder, was published by Glasslyre Press. She was a shortlist prize winner in the 2018 Terrain Poetry Contest, judged by Jane Hirschfield. That's pretty cool. She has also been awarded the Lascaux Poetry Prize, the Bristol Poetry Prize, and the Tiferet Poetry Prize. She's had work listed for the National Poetry Competition and has work published or forthcoming in Plume, Guernica Editions, New Voices, Contemporary Writers Confronting the Holocaust, Verse Daily, and Tupelo Quarterly. And just some. On a personal note, when Lois interviewed me for Poets Cafe, it was the conversation every poet dreams of. She had read all of my books and she knew what she wanted to talk about. She understood my poems and my vision with such depth that I learned more about my own writing by talking with her. At the end of the interview, we weren't done talking, so we went out to lunch. And then she drove me to the venue where my husband's band was giving a concert, and we enjoyed the music together. Lois has a new series of poems based on Rainer Maria Rilke, who I also feel as a poet's soulmate. Lois, I love these poems even more than what I've already seen from you, and I've been a friend and fan for so many years. You read so beautifully. Your voice is made for poetry. So now you're on.
Wow. Thank you so much, Diane. That's such a beautiful welcome and introduction. And you know, I've had a resonance with you and your work for a long time, and it was a joy to go to your workshop a few years ago and spend time with you, and also to connect with the poets that you have had great meaning for you and have also, had great meaning for me. I mean, we have similar parallels in those lines. Rilke and Lorca and some of the ecstatic poets. So anyway, thank you so much for that introduction. And there's lots more to say about you and your beautiful collection. And I'm very honored to be reading at your launch. So I'm going to start with a poem that, or I should say, couple of poems that are a little bit on the heavier side, but then it's going to get a bit lighter as we move on. So this is a poem called Blessings, and it's in 4 parts. And the last part has to do with David White. It's a poet and speaker, theologian, many universed being that I actually got a chance to interview and meet. So this is called Blessings, and the different blessings that come into our lives. My neighbor was from the old country, her babushka the color of a Bezoar goat. She came toward me on Ash Wednesday as if I were an apparition, a saint appearing like a gift in her garden. Her bones had already lost their breath, and her eyes held the remains of villages. children too small to walk the long road, parents strapping them in boxes on the sides of donkeys, babies and the old dying without water or shelter in places where the danger hadn't passed. At 13, I wanted to be a nun, to love without need to filter resin from the grape. I was called to the church more than once, the church of innocence, the church of the psychotic father, the church of womanhood, the church of poetry and its illuminated manuscripts. They've all burned down except for one in this half-finished heaven. I clarify wine no more than I am the saint my neighbor needs. Still, I smile down at her, not understanding Armenian. Only the gesture as her hand hovers from right to left shoulder. I cannot bring back her ancestors. 2. Bless the boy who shot the boy, then pointed at his own temple with an automatic pistol, the mind's nave closing over the steel chamber, each bullet handmade by the father who was found dead on the floor by his boy 2 years before. Bless the mothers, swans turned upside down, necks reaching toward the moss of the seabed. Bless the 10,000 souls who gathered in Santa Clarita to grieve the ghosts, the many who gave thousands to the shooter's mother, the ones who said, we must continue to bless all the empty beds. 4. For David White. Didn't it seem as if the nave of the church grew as tall as a eucalyptus, our silence a mist hovering above its crown? And didn't it feel as if he were holding our silence from across the podium, certain as his linen shirt as he looked out at the pews, his eyes reaching into our gorges of loss, our fractured thoughts of a nation split down its middle. I thought of the Baruch, which says God is the true source of all blessings. But I've been kissed on the cheek, and it was a small rain that left nothing but thoughts of what it was and wasn't, as if a tree pressed lips to skin, its green skirting the house of you, sweeping from room to room, filling the floorboards with its breath, your walls becoming water, the body forgetting it carried anything at all. So this next poem is an ekphrastic poem. I got to think, I saw a documentary on Van Gogh and they talked about his ear. And then I realized that, I started to research a little bit and I discovered that this woman had done an entire book about what happened to his ear. She went to Arles, she interviewed people. And so it started to create a kind of narrative that I found so compelling and interesting. And I don't know if any of you have been to the Van Gogh experience, but we still continue to connect and harvest his work, his words. And so I was very moved by this. So this is his self-portrait with bandage ear and pipe. We've all seen that one where he's turned to the side and he's got his bandage ear. 1889. And it has an epigraph from him that he supposedly said about the ear when he gave it. Keep this object carefully. not to shock the prostitute whose flower you'd recently splashed poppy red, already crusting on its crown, not because Menier's worm bore its way into your mind, or how the paint you drank from the brush jar drew you down its dim well. Not that you sliced your ear with a razor when Theo told you he was to marry Jovan. Not even a recent theory that in a fit of anger, Gauguin flicked off the lobe with his rapier and blood-spattered carmine, stifling your shoes, already confused with too much pigment. It's still a mystery, sticky as tallow. Believe what you wish. Perhaps, as Levis suggested, the woman placed the ear on a windowsill to listen for her, whether to comfort or terrify, he didn't say. But yesterday, as I walked the moss-ridden path, I saw a single calla lily listening from the forest floor, sheltered by the pines and surrounded in jade, looking white as an apology. So this poem came up today. It's out in Pratik, P-R-A-T-I-K, which is published by Yu Sharma. And he did a special on Los Angeles poets. So they put this one up today, and it's from Night Ladder. And I thought I'd read it. It's called Red Horse. And for those of you who are interested, here's my little Night Ladder. I'll put a link there later. So Red Horse. No one understood this blood run to the moon, this blaze of you, red horse in a swollen sky, how you loosed fire ants like a fistful of fire ants, how your temper could burn a field when there was too much to drink. But there were days we'd spread the blanket on the grasses near the sycamores and let the desert air run through us. Let the sage burn our nostrils as we sipped a silky Rioja, a wine you liked to translate, as you decoded everything beautiful. Your lips full and slightly curled. Siempre, siempre, jardín de mi agonia, tu cuerpo fugitivo para siempre. Always, always, garden of my last breath, your body escaped forever. Lorca in his red shoes, lighting our tongues, lifting our hips, until the sun turned poppy and burst. So I'm going to read a few poems from the series that Diane was talking about. Ever since I started writing and read Letters to a Young Poet, Rilke has been the poet and a guide for me all this time, and it hasn't stopped, which is unusual because sometimes, you know, you get enamored by a poet and you read and read, and then you're like, okay, I'm done with that person and I'm on to the next one. But it's never been that way. You know, I always go back to him for inspiration. And I also have a Rilke page, which tells you what a fiend I am for his poetry. And I have 50,000 followers now on that page. So I got to go to, well, let me track back a little bit. I discovered that the maid who lived with him for the last 5 years of his life in Museau, which is in the Veyras region of Switzerland, kind of a couple hours from Geneva, had written a memoir, and it was very difficult to track down. I finally got it from a library in Japan, and I was very excited. Of course, it was in German. She was from the Swiss-German part of Switzerland. And I was connected by a mutual wonderful friend, William O'Daly, who introduced me to Ava West, who is here tonight and has done the most beautiful, elegant, tender translations of not only the memoir, but of letters, correspondence, shopping lists, that we've discovered from Frida, who was his housekeeper. So I'll just read a couple of poems from that. She came there. She was very young, in her 20s. She came by train to live with this poet in a chateau, in the 13th century chateau with no running water. And, pretty wild, right? In the 1920s. So she has a lot of interesting experiences. So this is one of the first, this is her traveling down to meet him for the first time. Frida travels by train to meet Rilke for the first time. And then there's an epigraph from her. Against all expectations, I, a young and inexperienced girl, was selected out of many applications to keep house for the poet Rainer Maria Rilke at Museum. Frida Baumgartner, October 1921. Oh, and it starts with a line from Lisa Robertson. The sky is complicated and flawed, and we're up there in it. Opening its letters, crossing countries to clean someone's clouds, crossing mountains stacked with chanting, stacked with secrets, strange tongues that want to define us, that refuse to taste us, as in tasting this last honey-dipped slice of apple on this train. I watch the sun spark rivers without faces, watch my face disappear and reappear in the passenger window, disappear like Borges and never return. He won't believe I read Borges. He won't believe I can attend to his silence. Silence is a letter you never open, a waiting. Silence is a ball of yarn knitting sky in a corner. What we want, we fashion. Fashion the proper weather for our wanting. Wanting what is always made of what we cannot make ourselves. His blue eyes in the window. He makes what I want. I will fashion what he needs. I will make a cowbell of wishes. I will not ring it. So this next one is the title poem, a couple more poems, from the collection, which right now is called The Stranger's Needs. And again, it begins with an epigraph from Frida. Chateau Museau was extremely primitive. The rooms were comfortable, but there was no electricity and no running water in the house. In the beginning, I knew nothing. Not of the steel pots that required constant scrubbing or the way to press a shirt of linen. Wait for the iron to smell like burnt leaves on an October morning. Not of how to bathe in a castle without plumbing, cotton cloth dipped in an icy pail of water, a dab of lavender soap to scent the skin. Nothing of how to undress by paraffin lamp in the cold knot of December, or the desires of a body at 26, all of me rising into the belly. I had to learn to live in silence. He wanted another Lenny, a woman who walked like a cat by moonlight and understood his needs with a single look. How could I find my way to a man who has no map? Sometimes I would say to the mirror, "This is not the life you promised." Sometimes I would say to the bed, "Someone will carry me like a candle to their chapel." So one day, Frida comes downstairs in the middle of the night. And this is called Frida's Glove, Chateau Museau, summer 1922. And it begins with an epigraph from The Poetics of Space by Bachelard. It's a very odd quote discovered about Rilke. And it says, "The poet Rilke, donning his maid suede gloves and dusting furniture in the wee hours of the morning. He liked to do that, like caressing the body of a lover. After this," he said, "there's nothing that you do not know." There was a candle burning inside my brow. I could not pinch its flame, so I crept out of the fevered bed to the forest of our floors and their cool against my feet. Green and green again, like moss ribbons sewn to our felt tree. There was a shadow near the window, then just a hand at first, moving up the velvet drapes, independent as a whistle from nowhere. A thin figure appeared, fingers and thumb gliding up the drape's edge. Something at the wrist, a thickness, and between the fingers like a new skin, a fourchette with a slight webbing that layered the delicate hand. My suede glove moved slowly up the plaited cord, then down. One finger drew a line from forehead to neck, and I felt as if he traced my own throat, down to the clavicle, then up to the edge of my left lobe. I shivered. The moon shook too, so sewn to the poet's mind that the fabric of our scene tilted, then buried itself in the night's scene. So I think, I'm not sure how much time I have left, Diane. One or two poems or coming kind of close, right?
Oh, please. Read another poem, please, or two if you wish.
Okay. All right, so I'll skip this little guy, and I think I'll finish with this last one. So this is called Only the Moon Holds Her Exits and Entrances, Museau, 1921. He had said that when she first came and her voice sounded like a wounded animal. And I thought a lot about that. And actually, there's a recording of her and her sister speaking at one point when Eva and I, or Ava will go back to Switzerland. We'll get that recording so I can really hear how she sounds. But okay, so this comments on that. Only the moon holds her exits and entrances. I don't believe what my body says. The whole of me too tall for most men. My voice a wounded animal. A body that holds forks and knives and pokers for the fire. Blue coals alive as dusk. I don't believe its cries and moans and cracks of thunder hush between the lips. If an orchid transforms from hard bulb by the grace of rain and light, let it find flowering in the moist ground of your silence. Let it bloom not from photosynthesis, but desire. And let this body enter holding love under the tongue, its sublingual light, a faint disk against the shift to rose, dissolving and lighting this throat. Let the body be the beautiful dark butterfly coming significantly and expressly toward you from the dimly shining windows in a ballroom of guests. Let me slip between the cracks of your closed door to be touched the way the butterfly holds your finger, landing soft as sorrow, as rain. Thank you.
Lois, thank you so much. I just love hearing you read. I love these poems even more every time I see them and hear them.
Thank you so much. Oh my goodness, thank you. It's a pleasure to share them here. I'm delighted and totally excited to introduce Diane's reading and collection. As I mentioned earlier, and as she talked about, our fantastic radio interviews, the connection that we made, and finding those connection points through everything that sort of exchanged between us. The workshops, the poetry exchanges, and her work, which I have consumed in a way that is like a nourishment to me. I actually have the book nearby. I pick it up and I read it. This is her latest collection I'm talking about. I open it where I want to read it, and it's sort of like a manna for me, because, and especially in this world and everything that we're going through, her poetry and this collection is life-giving. I'm going to read just a little something here that I wrote, which is, when I read Diane's work, it's not only her compelling narratives, her broad range of subjects, or a certain spiritual manna that draws me in. At its core, it's the music which infuses her entire over. The pulse in the body, hyperlinked to a cosmic view, and a deep, deep sensory insight that enables her to inhabit what she puts her attention toward. Like Rilke, her insing offers her readers a multi-eyed vision, buzzing with life and perpetual movement. We know, apart from being a poet, she's a musician and plays cello. She's a contra dancer who's traveled all over the continent. Music is her essence and life, and it inhabits the metaphysical world she creates in her poetry and novels. I love what Stephen Dunn said best. While listening to the Enigma Variations, new and selected poems shows us a poet over a long and rich career who is undefeated by the acknowledged difficulties of life, of living an affirmative life. An affirmative life. Yes, that's Diane. Diane is the author of 8 books of poems, 2 novels, and a photo memoir of her 400-mile trek in the Nepal Himalayas. Her new and selected poems, while listening to the Enigma Variations, was just published by Glasslyre Press. She's the editor of Fog and Light, San Francisco, through the eyes of poets who live here. Diane lives in San Francisco, where she plays cello in the Golden Gate Symphony and creates her life as an art form. Thank you, Diane. Welcome.
Thank you, Lois. Always a pleasure to speak with you and just hear your thoughts about everything. I'm going to start with a poem called The Genie. I feel that every day we have choices about the way that we will face the world, and I wrote this poem from the point of view of the genie in Aladdin's lamp. The genie, the dancing girl in the yellow silk pants, shimmered in my dream. She was a flame that kept burning in the morning. If I bring her to Aladdin, I can gaze into her chocolate eyes and lose myself in the maze of her footsteps. Aladdin thinks I am his servant, but every morning I weave a dream into the world where he walks by the river. I hold my prism in the river of sunlight, each wave a color of possibility to weave footsteps into the world I paint every morning. I can dream or disappear into the longing for the light that becomes invisible inside the bronze of my lamp. Every morning you choose to dance or disappear. My next poem, Leap, is a poem in 3 parts. It's for Victor Phillips, who guided me into my first leap. As a poet, I always like to explore new territory. And in part 3, I explored the idea of reincarnation. Leap, for Victor Phillips. He said, if you dance your poems, you will feel them in your body. You will become a bird, an orbiting planet, a shooting star. We were in a chapel at a small university in Iowa, his arms well trained in ballet. What I most remember about that night is when he said leap and put me into a lift, an amazing way to fly. At that time in our lives, we were all searching for elusive, perfect forms in the sky garden of meditation, the music of touch, and the joy of leaping. We were reading Castaneda, the Bhagavad Gita, Robert Bly, Mirabai, Rumi, Yoga Vasishta, tumbling in angst and joy. I read about the green flash in an Annie Dillard book, then saw it for the first time over the temple by the lake in Pokhara, Nepal, after 24 days of trekking around Annapurna. Flying monkeys in every direction, a vision from a Himalayan dream. 2, you can see a light around him as he sits on the stage of the San Francisco Ballet before the performance of Don Quixote. He's been training to do this leap, this moment, all of his life. He says to himself, Basilio, don't worry, just dance. Legs, are you still there? In the wings, he gathers feathers, then leaps onto the stage, loving the moment, having a great time. He's laughing at windmills, and behind a curtain, Sancho is ready to ride on a white donkey. And Dulcinea, you know she's looking at you, even when her eyes seem to be somewhere else. On the stage, you cannot hide anything. The music takes you inside. Now, leap. Nureyev whispers, if I did it, you can do it. It's his choreography, beautiful but terrifying. Basilio is ready to lift his partner with one hand. Dulcinea, this is your moment. Leap. Classical ballet is so hard. You fall, you get up, you try. You leap through the ring of fire until you do the impossible. I think of my friend in the chapel, that night of poetry, my first leap. If it hadn't been for the AIDS epidemic, he would still be dancing. 3, 20 years later, he is a hummingbird streaking across my garden. The green dance of early morning, a glissando waterfall dip, calla lilies stretching toward light that has been traveling through time. At the edge of the sunset, a tidal shift, a green feather. The sky, field of aurora borealis, rippled light. Somewhere in a dream, he steps out of a garden of strangers into a whir of grasshoppers and slides down the earth tunnel, shivering and shimmering. As he pulses through the birth canal, full of prayers and promises, undiscovered constellations are looking at themselves through his eyes. My next poem is Omen. A few years ago, Eric and I drove to Oregon to chase the solar eclipse. We stayed with a poet in Eugene and then took a back road to the totality. As all of this was happening, I tried to imagine what it would be like to see an eclipse in ancient times. Omen. Through the scimitar shadows by the 19th century church and graveyard, the world is getting darker. Crescents of light on the church walls, slivers of hay still glowing in a field of tiger lilies. A morning sunset over the ponderosa pines, and at the totality, a hush, applause, a dark feather. First light of the corona around a dark sun. The owl wakes up from its dream, the Labrador quiet at the feet of a young boy. We traveled to this place, following a trail through time in the footsteps of ancient astronomers to view a strange light. And then that first ray of light of the world beginning again. My next poem is Tree of Life. Poets often serve as the conscience of the society. 3 years ago, I lost a very dear friend during the synagogue shooting at Tree of Life in Pittsburgh. Jerry was in my circle of friends in high school, not just someone across the room. And I woke up with this poem 4 days after the shooting. Tree of Life, Kaddish for Dr. Jerry Rabinowitz. It's a form of praying to hold the darkness inside yourself and embrace it the way you would hold water in a flowing river. To wake up with tears flowing from a dream, your face a field of milkweed as the pods scatter in a wind of prayer, embracing the growing cold. I remember where he sat by the window at the bottom of the floodplain, where the rivers emptied into the streets that afternoon. Fire trucks creating a wake as they moved through the water. And when the bullets came, he ran toward the shattering souls, following his instincts, always to help, to heal the wounded and the dying. His friends hold each other, reaching out through time and a dark river, holding seeds planted long ago by the Tree of Life, say Kaddish in front of an open Ark of the Covenant. He would want you to find your light and embrace it again, to walk back into the forest we call the world. Hold his memory the way you would hold his face. Let his voice ripple through time. Where the trunk of a redwood tree, thick with the rings of centuries, was burned by lightning, shine your light into the dark world. That is a hard poem for me to read without tears in my eyes. It's a very life-changing event, and I hope it's something that you don't ever have to experience. So I'm going to segue with a very gentle poem. Somewhere in Tibet or in my mind, it's about an experience in meditation. Late at night, I think about atoms and stars, layers of infinity, reaching out to the far expanse of the universe where there is no edge, reaching in to the core of atoms, layer after layer of particles, energy, light. There is something even beyond this, which I can feel, but don't completely understand. Somewhere on a mountain in India or Tibet, a monk is chanting sutras and carving mani stones. He sees what I see as a goddess with 1,000 arms, and the mountain whispers her name. This is a new and selected poems while listening to the Enigma variations, and I'm going to go a little bit into the selected section now. There are some poems that stay with you for years, and this is one of them. In the voices of the birds. What I most remember about Christopher is the way he knew the names of all the birds at dawn by their songs. His corn silk blonde hair, blue overalls, no shirt, the strength of his shoulders, and the way we stayed awake all night. There was light in his touch between the birds. They flew in and out of his fingers, and birds outside our window, a window we couldn't open again that way. We met when we could after that, in Iowa, Switzerland, San Francisco, in borrowed cabins by 2 different oceans. You took me to my brother's wedding in a red pickup truck, made fun of the priest and his future mother-in-law, which you claimed permission to do because you were Catholic. I remember the way you hurt me, what you said, and the sentence I typed on your portable Smith Corona in Nantucket before I left for the last time. It was November with a light dusting of snow over the sand. The pebbles on the beach hid their messages. On separate sides of the continent, we listened to different oceans and slammed our lives shut. You in Brooklyn Heights with your 2-year-old son on your shoulder. Me in San Francisco, climbing the long hill to 24th Street. 12 years later, holding your first book of poems in my hands, I am hungry for memories, hungry for every word, hungry for any hint of a message where I might find myself. In the inscription you write, there are histories in this book you may be familiar with because you were there. I am not the arms where you will rest your head when you're 80 years old, but I always hear you in the voices of the birds. My next poem, Thorndon Park, there are other poems that you have to look back through time to really understand them. This is a poem about being 19 years old in Syracuse. Thorndon Park. In memory, everything is green. Aurora glowing in the sky over a mountain, green light filling a room, tropical leaves in the greenhouse, green love, a green hill, sliding with friends on cafeteria trays down a path of snow. We were green in our knowledge of the world, on our backs in the amphitheater, under a sky show of stars. Through a telescope from an attic window, my first view of the rings of Saturn. in a blizzard during a snowstorm, my first ride in a snow mover with giant wheels. In the stacks of the university library, I was always searching for poets with women's names. Diane DePrima, Adrienne Rich, Denise Levertov. In the house on the other side of Thornton Park, he dreamed of intricate interweaving harmonies. I dreamed about my father. Music and moonlight through a stained glass window. Later, I watched an artist friend sew legs on the bottom of a painting of two women when she ran out of canvas. The woman leaned into the colors the sky turns before the light disappears. Everything on an impulse, jump into the green VW Bug, drive to Niagara Falls at night to see the moonbow on tumbling water, a shimmering silver white arc. In April, drive to Key West during spring vacation, sleep on the beach with the salty blue ocean crashing into our dreams. Everyone too absorbed in self-discovery to understand the ocean of tears that fell out of what they touched and let go of. Climbing ladders and scaffolds of buildings under construction. We were under construction. Yes, our lives were like that, green in those days. And a tiny poem now based on a hexagram from the I Ching. Keeping still. I dreamed we were helping each other up a long mountain. The mountain was made of words, and the moon had a green shadow. How would it feel to hold you all night? There's an earthquake in my spine. I have three more. This one is The Sky Away from Here. It's a San Francisco poem. It's about a total eclipse of the moon. However, we live 3 blocks from the beach and it was foggy that night. So I just had to imagine what it might be like other places. The Sky Away from Here. Somewhere the moon turned copper. Druids circled Stonehenge in amber robes. My astronomy professor was on his balcony with a telescope. I was in San Francisco under a thick cloud cover. In the sky away from here, shadows of buffaloes ran across the moon, and coyotes howled their dirge to the dark night. In London, a coven of mooncloud women swept their homes, cooked moon soup, chanted the old stories, wore moonstones. In the Zagros Mountains, Sufis gathered in a stone circle, read Rumi for an oracle, became dervishes at midnight. In Kyoto, a geisha in Pontacho wore a kimono painted with a silk moon, brushed her lover with a feather. And in the Gatsby land of the Long Island beaches, 2 lovers bathed in a tide pool, using the dark of the moon as a cover. In San Francisco, I entered my dreams as the rain pounded disappointment on my window. But in the sky away from here, luminous tattoos danced across the sky and shattered into new constellations. The buffalo, the geisha, the feather, a tide pool of lovers on the far side of the moon. So along with being a poet, as you know, I'm a cellist in the Golden Gate Symphony. And as a cellist, instead of chanting Aramaic, I prefer to play the Kaddish on my cello. Matt Arnerich, a very gifted composer from Santa Rosa, wrote an orchestral piece for my Tree of Life poem, which we performed, and the core of it is the Kaddish on the cello. It's very beautiful and not easy to play. Kaddish for my mother. You need to play this music the way colors blur and intensify at sunset. Wrap your legs around the wood and lean into the sound. This piece demands that you reach into a deeper part of yourself and access more power. It makes you climb higher on the fingerboard and learn how to do it musically. Saying an ancient prayer in Aramaic does not give you the emotions you feel from these strings. Tears in the vibrato, the voice of a tenor cantor. You never did this before? Now climb the ladder of these notes. Listen and make your fingers wail the vibrato this piece requires. And suddenly, ancient cities are revealed to you. Your mother's voice, the emotions. She could inspire a room full of worshipers to feel music inside a prayer, indigo threads inside the weaving of a prayer shawl. The wood from the black forest whispers its secrets. Priestesses who knew the mysteries are chanting from your strings. When you were a girl, your mother sang to you every night 2 lullabies, her voice rocking like a cradle in the trees. Lean into your cello now with your arms, your heart, your knees, the echo of her voice. And my final poem for the evening is Turtle Island. In the Native American tradition, they call the earth Turtle Island. I find this very inspiring. Turtle Island. What if the world was created by a giant turtle swimming across the sky at the beginning of time? What if the turtle carried dreams in her belly, giving birth to fish and stars? What if the high-flying tern marked the world lines of space and time with nets of aurora borealis? What if the donkey said, the humans are a joke, spinning through space, juggling fire and ice? What if the crab said, crawl sideways if you want to uncover the dreams that are painted inside of shells? What if the moon said, the night will tell you secrets if you listen to the music inside of stones? What if the shark said, you will discover fish that glow like lanterns in deeper currents of ocean water? What if the octopus said, your dreams are tentacles into a future filled with fish and golden apples? What if the turtle keeps swimming out of the sky into a universe hidden somewhere else? What if the buffaloes stampede with their ancestors across the Great Plains under an ocean of sky? Buffalo Woman says, the world is a dream or nightmare. Weave your visions with tender hands. Thank you very much. So I'm now going back to the gallery so I can see all of you. I really want to thank all of you who came tonight. I want to thank Lois for reading with me. Thank everyone who is here. And Lois and I have the same publisher. Normally, if we were in the gallery, we'd be lining up for a book signing. If you go on the website of Glassliar Press, our publisher, you can find our books and get them directly from the publisher. If you want a signed copy of either of our books, send an email. For me, you can send an email to bluelightpress@aol.com. That's what you needed to respond to get here. And for Lois, either send to her directly, or if you don't know her email, send it to me, and I will forward it. And again, a great pleasure, a great honor to be with you tonight. And at this point, we're going to formally end the reading, but we have some social time. Normally, after a reading, during the book signing, you get to talk to the poets. What I want to ask you to do is to stay muted when you're not speaking. Just talk one at a time. We're going to be around for a few minutes. And what a pleasure to read to you tonight.
It's like one gorgeous wave after another, Diane. I just was riding that wave and thinking, oh, I love this. This is one. The last one you read, like Loretta mentioned, is also one of my favorite poems as well. But they're all so powerful and pungent and moving, ecstatic, just beautiful, beautiful reading. Thank you for sharing your work and, allowing me in this space with you.
Well, you were the one I wanted to be here with me, and I'm just so smitten with your new poems. Just so amazing. I know that when they become a book, I'm going to read them over and over. Brian Gardam, you want to say something? You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, Diane.
Hey.
Yes, thank you for Kaddish about your friend in Pittsburgh and the invitation to take courage. That was a hard one. But also thank you for Thornton Park. I remember the cafeteria trays and the icy hill there, and some of the other bits of history there. So it was a pleasure to hear that. Pleasure to see you.
My pleasure too. When Joni Mitchell gave a concert, she was in the music building, and after the concert, a bunch of us were outside, and someone handed her a cafeteria tray, and she went sliding down the hill. It was so much fun. So anyhow, that looks like it. Very happy that you were here, and please enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you. It was beautiful.
Thank you, everyone, for coming and supporting poetry on this beautiful Friday evening, and for supporting Diane, who does so much, as we know, for the poetry world. As a publisher and as a teacher, she really deserves all our support. She's one of the best literary citizens I know. So if you don't have that collection, I hope you will get it.
Yes.
And I want to also thank members of my family for showing up, along with my family of friends. Not all poets have families that are interested in what they do, and it means a lot to me that you came here tonight. Janet, Paul, Irene, a pleasure to see you in the gallery. So, stop the recording and